Hi, everyone, and welcome back to PsycHD podcast with your host, B&B. I am Brianna.
And I am Brittany.
Thank you all for tuning into this week's episode. And again, just to remind all of the listeners what we're about here at Psych the Podcast. We are a podcast here to create content for diverse students interested in earning their PhD in psychology.
And today, as a guest, we have Dr. Edward Delgado-Romero, and I will, briefly read his bio. Dr. Edward Delgado-Romero is an Associate Dean for Faculty and Staff Services and a professor in the Department of Counseling and Human Development Services at the Mary Frances Early College of Education of the University of Georgia. He is also a licensed psychologist in Georgia. Dr. Delgado-Romero's parents were both immigrants to the United States from Colombia. Dr. Delgado-Romero is a founder and past president of the National Latino Psychological Association, also known as NLPA. He was named a padrino/elder of NLPA and was named a fellow of the American Psychological Association through Society for the Psychological Study of Culture, Ethnicity, and Race through Division 45, and the Society of Counseling Psychology through Division 17. In 2011, he was awarded the Early Career Award for Psychology in the Public Interest by APA, and in 2013, he received the Distinguished Career Contributions to Research from Division 45. Dr. Delgado-Romero enjoys mentoring graduate students, has actively presented and written with his advisees. His research team, BN, is a collaborative effort to fuse research and service. Dr. Delgado-Romero emphasizes the need for psychological research to give back to ethnic minority and immigrant populations. He has mentored 42 PhD students to date, and 80% of them have been people of color. Dr. Delgado-Romero is the founder of Clínica en la Quech, a bilingual training clinic that serves Spanish speakers. He is a father of 5 and married to Angela Romero Sheet. His household is a happily blended family consisting of Colombian, Greek, Irish, Dutch, and Chinese heritage. Life is never boring with a crew of Javiera, Isa, Nick, Emma, and Gil. Welcome, Dr. Delgado-Romero. You are so distinguished, renowned. We are so glad that you decided to join our podcast and give your wealth of knowledge to our audience and people that are hoping to become psychologists. I know that your story and your trajectory and your path may touch a lot of people, and we are so grateful to have you here.
Well, thank you for asking me.
And go dogs.
Yep, go dogs. That's right.
So also, before we got started with this interview, we did want to address an update within APA. During their October 29th meeting, the APA Council of Representatives adopted an apology for APA's role and the role of the discipline of psychology in contributing to systemic racism. The resolution, which passed unanimously, acknowledges that the association should have apologized sooner. APA and many in psychology have long considered such an apology, but failed to accept responsibility. And based on, this and them acknowledging their contribution to systemic inequities through racism, racial discrimination, denigration, we wanted to know, what was your reaction to this news?
Well, I think if that's what the council wanted to do to reflect what they're feeling, I think that's good. It's really up to the folks, to the public and to the students and the faculty and psychologists to decide what to do with that. I do hope that actions follow from that. I think there's been a lot of efforts to to work on the association and stuff. So I think there's many psychologists who have a lot of hope for APA and where they're going, and there's also psychologists who've decided to make their professional homes elsewhere just because they're not as optimistic that there will lead to be any kind of deep, meaningful change. But optimism is good to have, and that people are going to we're going to see what flows, what actions flow from after the words.
Yeah, that's agreed. We actually were able to talk a little bit about this last week when we did the first episode of the second season. And what seems to be unanimous for us is really being curious and interested into the actionable steps that's going to be followed by the statement that they just put out.
Yeah, that'll be good. I think one of the disappointing things that I see is just simply that despite years of efforts, there's not been a bigger pipeline of ethnic minority psychologists in particular. And, it's, something materially has to change in terms of having deeper representation. I know we've had several presidents of APA who have been, champions of diversity and been pushing the association forward. But how deep is that? How deep is the leadership? And that's always been my question. But that's not to take anything away from the people who are leading, who are doing what they can.
Yeah, and I think you brought up something. For me, it's interesting. I'm wondering if, part of this information is what may wanted you to be a founder of NLPA. I'm wondering if psychology and knowing the role that they've played within racism and discrimination, if, founding NLPA may have came out of that and, out of just having another professional house for people of color.
Yeah, so I think that, right. So I think I went to an undergrad where I was received a very traditional education in psychology. And there wasn't a whole lot about the role that any people of color played in it, or the role of psychology in maintaining slavery and racism. So, I just got the very European, male-centered version of what psychology was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that really I didn't really have an awakening about how things could be different until in grad school we had a 6-week seminar on multicultural. So it was still very much not discussed. But it wasn't, I think, until I went on internship at Michigan State, and they have the MECA program, the Multi-Ethnic Counseling Center Alliance. And by charter, they have to have staff from the major ethnic groups. And it was the first time I'd been supervised by a Latinx person. It was the first time that I had met people from, a lot of different backgrounds who were psychologists. And it was then that they were telling me about groups like the Society of Indian Psychologists, the Association of Black Psychology, Asian American Psych Association. It was really do you know these things exist? And I was like, no, I had no idea that these things existed. And then in that time, that was 97. And then in 99 was the first Multicultural Summit. And I went to that. And the previous group, which was the National Hispanic Psychological Association, was kind of dwindling in influence. And there was a couple of people who were trying to keep it going, but there wasn't a whole lot of energy behind it. So several of us got together and said, we now more than ever during this multicultural kind of coming together of people, we really need to have a group that represents the Latinx perspective. And so we refounded the organization. The original organization was founded in 1979 and had kind of faded away a bit. But then the new one started officially in 2002, but didn't really start with conferences in 2004 and organizations. So in some ways, yes, it is. It's a space for people to have a focus on Latinx issues that are not simply like just you have to find them somewhere in this gigantic program. It's like it's all about it. So, and it's not necessarily that it's always harmonious. There's a lot of discussion about the role for Afro-Latinos in our group or Afro-Latinx people in our group, and the inclusion or not of Afro-Latinx perspectives. And there's a lot of, the counter is that people then create this group called the white Latinx. For many of us, that doesn't really fit, but people see that there's a white group. And at any rate, it's just a unique opportunity, like the other National Ethnic Minority Psych Association groups, to be immersed in an issue and being able to talk about it, and to develop it and try to make something of it, and along the way to mentor people, provide a focus for people to maybe who haven't seen very many people of color in their training programs or haven't met people. I really drove in '98. I think I drove to hear Patricia Arredondo talk, because I heard about her, but I never met her, and so I drove to meet her and to hear what she was talking about, and that was great. That was great for me, to really just start to meet other Latinx psychologists and start forming those networks and stuff. I think it was a great thing, but I had to seek it out. So in my training programs, I was most of the time the only one, or maybe there was scattered groups of people, but no professors that were of color. And it wasn't until we got into the clinical settings where there started to be supervisors and stuff. So that was really when the multicultural emphasis took off. And I still think that a lot of people within the Ethnic Minority Psych Association still are ambivalent about how much to be involved with the bigger APA, and are these groups separate, and what does that mean? Or do they follow the model of APA? Or is that just replicating this structure with a different group of folks? So there's a constant exploration of identity. But I would say that there is different models of the ethnic minority groups being either kind of subsets of APA or diametrically kind of separate from APA. And I think that tension has always been there. I think that AB-Psy has always provided leadership in terms of really thoughtful examination of exactly what their role is. And I've always enjoyed sitting down with AB-Psy leadership and hearing what they have to say, and how very thoughtful. And then, of course, they're the oldest group and have the most experience and stuff. So I think it is worth just discussing what ethnic minorities, kind of what is your relationship to the big group, and how close or distant do you want to be from it? And there's no right answers, but I mean, I guess throughout your career you might feel different distances, and you might have different needs. So I would say that that's very much a tension that we continue to explore.
Definitely. And thank you for your expansive answer, touching on a lot of different things. Really. And I know I really mean that, because you touched on some really important things. And, one thing that stood out to me is you said you had, a multicultural class for, was it 6 weeks?
6 weeks. Mm-hmm.
And that is completely insane to me. But I'm sure, you were in APA accredited program, correct?
Right.
And so that brings us back to the apology statement and the role they play in systemic racism and the systems that they not only maintain and create, but actively, play an authoritative role in. they not only teach the future psychologists and train them, they are creating the programs, they are approving the syllabi that we're learning in these classes. They are saying it's okay, for you to take 6 weeks of a multicultural class. But then also we're expected to be, culturally competent clinicians. And so it's sort of that, balancing both. And I think you really spoke to carving out your own network, carving out your own sort of culturally relevant education, training, mentoring, even I feel like you touched on, and
Yeah,
really creating those spaces for the lack that is in the systems that are already there, which, I truly appreciate. And I can also really appreciate you working together with other ethnic minority groups, such as the Association of Black
yeah, that's
Psychologists.
exactly what I was thinking as you were going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think we can, as minorities, kind of relate to the lack in the structures that we want to see. And, we're kind of used to having to fill in, those roles, fill the gaps. And sometimes it is a question of, are you building to uphold systems that are already there, but just kind of, throw a Black or a Spanish in front of that? Or are you really looking at the structural systems that are in place, seeing, where that's gone wrong, and kind of building and creating your own system to fit for the people that you want to serve. So it's definitely a lot, of topics there that will, maybe we'll even get into later on in this episode.
Sure.
But just to, start off, I really want to know, since to hear about, some of the things you've done just in brief right now, can you tell us about what got you initially interested in psychology?
Mhm.
A high school psychology class, I found it interesting, and I was motivated to, hearing about operant conditioning and stuff. I thought it was really interesting stuff. But I went off to college to be a lawyer, and was pre-law when I started. But although it was interesting, it just didn't have that spark for me, that interest. And although my classes were super traditional at the undergrad level, I was drawn back to psychology, and I was very interested in doing things. I literally ran rat and pigeon labs, doing Skinner boxes and stuff like that. That was my job in the department. So
Okay.
I would run them through. That's how traditional that department was. And although that's not completely true, because we had one professor who was was really introducing and challenging everyone's ideas about gender roles, and was a feminist, and was really kind of
Mhm.
challenging us. And I came from a pretty sheltered Catholic school background, and a lot of this was pretty mind blowing. So it wasn't all super traditional. The one area in which we were which we learned a lot was feminism. Now, I would
Mhm.
also say that we were in the middle. I went to school in Memphis, and then we were in the middle of, a majority African American city at a predominantly white college. So there was a tension there that now I think the college, Rhodes College, does embrace a lot more, and there's a lot more diversity, and there's a lot more. The psych department is completely different, and they do things
Mhm.
differently. But back in the '80s, they weren't doing that. And I just would say, as a point to part of what you're saying, is when I went to school in the '90s, the standards were different, and I don't think
Mhm.
you could get away with the 6-week multicultural course now. Maybe, I don't
Right.
know. I don't know what, but at
I
the
would hope
time,
not.
Yeah, that's
that's
not even a semester. Yeah.
what we were doing. So I think hopefully things have evolved or changed. But so anyway, that I was interested in psychology. And when I was a senior, I was like, oh, I got to go to grad school. Where should I go? I asked my
Mhm.
mentors, and they were like, clinical psychology. You need to go to clinical psychology programs and,
Mhm.
do stuff. And I'm like, what stuff? I don't know. And so I never was very excited about it. So instead, I decided to work for a couple of years,
Mhm.
and I worked in a treatment center for adolescent sex offenders. And as I was working, I was trying to read and say, like, I'm really not excited about just studying more of the psychology stuff. What could I be interested in? And so I remember reading an article by Mary Fukuyama, who was a counseling center psychologist at University of Florida, and it was about using poetry in counseling, multicultural um, poetry in counseling. I was like, whoa, you can't study that. That's not, you can't, this isn't rats and pigeons. It's not okay to study. But I was super excited about it, interested, and I found out more about her, and I found out, started, there's this whole multicultural thing going on here, starting at least. And so, and it seems to be kind of almost all in counseling. And so I was like, well, what's counseling? And so as I kind of discovered it for myself, then I got interested in counseling psych, even though I will say that where I went to school at Notre Dame, that again, there wasn't a big emphasis on multicultural in the classroom. Now, I was super blessed to be able to work with Beverly Vandiver, who was a counseling center psychologist at the time at Notre Dame's counseling center before she went to be a professor and do all the things that she's done in terms of the cross-racial identity scale, and really, push the whole measurement idea really, to a different level. But she and I did a whole lot of workshops, and we worked with first gen, what we would call first gen now, first gen students of color. So I would say my education was very traditional in the classroom, but outside the classroom, I kept trying to find different spaces where I could engage with these kinds of issues. And that really changed things for me. And as I told you, when I went on internship, that changed also for me, because that was right around the time of the Multicultural Summit, or right before it, and meeting psychologists. And the director of the Counseling Center at Michigan State was a Native American psychologist who was very active in SIP, and she was telling me, her thoughts on the relationship with APA and SIP. And I was like, whoa, where's this coming from? It was really cool. But they were very, it was very healing in a lot of ways to be around people who were so committed and had all facets of diversity. And so, it made me want to do clinical work for a while. So I went to the University of Florida, where I was in the counseling center, and got to meet Mary Fukuyama and work with her, actually, which was neat, right? So when I met her, I was like, hey, you really inspired me. And I've really focused on working with Latinx students at Florida, since they have a huge student group. But the more I did, the more I kind of was more interested in the research, the teaching, the doc stuff. I was affiliate faculty with counseling psych and counselor ed, and I found myself wanting to be more over there. Now, I also work with Angela Ferguson. Is she still at Howard's program?
Yes. Yes.
Director of training.
Yeah, she and I good friends, and we worked together and wrote together, and I think she left right before I left, in terms of to join academia, and so we both had very similar routes. So I said to myself that I loved working with the students, but I wanted to do other stuff. And so then also Javiera was born, and I wanted to spend as much time as possible with her. And working 7 to 7 and doing tons of programming after hours and stuff wasn't going to cut it. And so I took a gamble to join the faculty, and that's when I decided to be a faculty person. That's a long time ago. But so then I was at IU for 3 years, and then I've been at Georgia ever since. So that was my route to find it. So I found counseling really in kind of a desperation of looking around in journals for anything that I would feel would be inspiring. And so, poetry and things were, and that was pretty cool for me. So that's how I ended up being in counseling psych on the faculty side. I think it's a great thing for students to think about. Like, you don't have to decide exactly what you're going to do right away. Right. So I'm about to go on internship. I need to know, am I going to be faculty? Am I going to be practitioner? Or when, you're going to have many careers during your career. So I was a counseling center psychologist, a faculty person, director of training, and now I'm an associate dean. And it's a totally different worlds. What associate deans spend their time doing is very different than what faculty, although I'm still am faculty. But you don't have to like figure it all out and know exactly and like pick one path and just stick with it. The cool thing about our training as counseling psychologists is that you can do many things. And during your life, you probably will end up doing many different things. So I found that to be, good skills for me to have, is that I could also do consulting, I could do teaching, I could do administration, I can do a lot of things because the education was so broad. So there's the other side of it. Although I wish we would have had more multicultural experience, it was pretty broad. So I was trained to do many things. And some people don't like that. They will say, tell me what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I'm like, you do not want that. You do not want that to know exactly what you're going to do the rest of your life. I think you probably want to find your way. And that's a little scary sometimes, but that's how I got into it. And the multicultural stuff developed starting at Michigan State and then became a focus of my career. And then the founding or the refounding of the National Hispanic Psych Association and the renaming of it to Latino Psych Association, Latino Psych Association, finally Latinx, which is now it's the National Latinx Psych Association. It has changed and evolved over the years and grown and all kinds of things. So, that's how it all started.
I think, you said a lot. And I think starting out, how we were talking about policy, and then you were saying that you initially wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool because when I remember I was in my master's program. There was a woman that was a year above me. She was a lawyer and coming back to school to become a counselor because she realized like she was helping these people, but was not helping them in the way that she wanted to help them. And I think that is so cool. And to see those careers kind of cross over. And even again, as you mentioned it, and then knowing that, you also had to search for what you were interested in within counseling psychology, because I love that it is broad. A lot of people are also attracted to that, myself, because I love flexibility. I love the idea of being able to do so many different things within the field. And I think you discussed that within like education and also just finding your niche and, working in labs and looking at material that you found interesting. And then there were some other concepts that I think you really touched on, such as healing and family. Like your child was born, you were considering that. Like there are so many different things that played a part in like your interest in psychology, your journey throughout psychology. And I think it's important for everyone to consider that, especially, our audience, when we're talking about what kind of career would you want to have? Why are you going for this graduate degree? Like what is the purpose and how will that fulfill you? So I know you mentioned a bit of like, I feel like some of your advice is for graduate students to kind of calm themselves so that they're not like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do when I leave here? Like you have a world of things that you can do. But what is some other kind of advice that you would give to students who are currently in graduate school?
Yeah, I guess part of it is really try to get to know, if it's not your faculty members, other people who are further along, and try to really get to know them, and not only just get to know them, but really understand what their life is truly like. So from the outside, it looks like, I experienced nothing but success, but that's not true. There's a lot of times where I get things rejected or don't get things that I wanted or positions I wanted or things like that. And I make a point to share that with my research team because it's easy to share the good stuff, but the reality is that your career will be a mixture of the good stuff and the stuff that's disappointing, but you may come to view it a different way. And my friend, Candace Hargons over at University of Kentucky, does just an outstanding job of modeling, and she'll talk about things when she didn't pass the EPPP the first time, she wrote about it. And it was powerful because a lot of my students say, well, I didn't know, that people don't talk about this. And so I think it's important to get to know faculty as people and understand that even the most successful faculty don't necessarily win all the time. That you really do get used to a lot of things not working out. And that many things do. So you're good about that, but a lot of your career will be spent in things you didn't get and things that didn't happen. And that I think it's important to know that even for us, this journey is not necessarily like a straight linear path. There's all kinds of ups and downs. So I would say for students is to say, take the long-term perspective. You have a career to do what you want to do, not just 4 years or one dissertation. You have your whole career to do things, and you reserve the right to move to a place because you want to live there, or be in relationships because you want to, or whatever it is that you want to do. And that may change what's available to you. So, I have full household, and I'm just not going to pick up and move anytime that I feel like it. So, you have to understand that life happens, and life happens in concert with your career. And then, you make decisions. So I would say to, take the long-term perspective, do what you need to do in your program, but understand that once you get out, there's no one holding you back. That PhD is a license to do whatever you want to do within ethical bounds, but you can do what you want to do. And no one can tell you. When I was a grad student, I did research on alcoholism. I did research on free will. I did research on ecological things, nothing of which I do now. And so, that's the thing is, you're doing it, you're learning how to do it, and then you go out there and decide, hey, what part of this am I going to use again? And that am I going to develop it? But you get to decide what you develop. I don't get to decide anymore. Once that person walks across the stage, I'm just the cheerleader now. I'm not telling anyone what to do.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful advice to graduate students. And I know you had spoken about sometimes graduate students being sort of like, I'm on this sort of track. I want to be a professor. I need to be doing this so I can get there. And we really sometimes see things in such a linear way and don't even think of, of course, we know that you could do a lot of things with the PhD. You could do a lot of things, with the doctorate, especially in counseling. But, sometimes we will get so focused on such a linear path. I need to do X to get directly to Y,
Right.
and sometimes don't consider the nuances and how you can get there. So, and it sounds like you've had a lot of crucial like mentors, and you spoke to getting to know your professors and sort of the people who are living at where you kind of are aspiring to be, and really getting to understand what that looks like to them. And I really think it's a human experience. It really humanizes the experience when you hear about some of the failures, honestly, that people go through when they've made it. Also, sometimes in graduate school, you see professors on the other side of things, like, you're licensed, you have this, you have your degree, I'm here struggling. And, sometimes that
The
can also,
anxiety.
it's the anxiety of, I'm not there. And once also sometimes that can, lend yourself to thinking of, but when I'm where you're at, it's going to be so much easier, or I will have made it and there will be no more failures there. So, and that's a myth. So
Right.
I really appreciate you speaking to the other side, not it all being success and a linear path when you finish.
Right. And it's all developmental, which is what we've been taught. And, at different stages we're going to be doing of your life, you're going to be doing different things. I think intellectually we can sit down with a client and say that, oh, the research shows that you'll switch your career at X amount of times.
Right.
So just because we're PhDs doesn't mean that that won't happen. I mean, it might, and you might find the one job and stick with it, and that's cool too. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is that even within that, you might find some side gigs. You might do consulting. You might find that you like speaking. You might like to be on CNN or whatever. There's there's many things that you're going to be doing, and you have your career to do them. That's the most, I think, probably the biggest piece of advice that I give to my students is that, you have a career to figure all of these research questions out. You don't have to do it all in one dissertation. The dissertation is your step towards that, but you have your whole career. Don't ask questions that you can answer in one dissertation.
Mm.
Do just one dissertation, but ask questions that are going to take you a while and carry you forward into things, whatever you want, however you want to work. But anyway, so I think being not afraid of kind of bigger questions, being ambitious, but at the same time realizing you have a career to figure this out. You don't have to do it all and right away.
Yeah, and I honestly think I kind of want to go back to that mentor piece, because I know it keeps coming up. I read it in your bio. You mention it when you talk about connecting with others and then mentoring your students. And I'm wondering, like, for people who are considering applying to graduate programs, for students like us, what would you say mentoring looks like outside, like after you graduate? Like, what does that look like, I guess, specifically with your students?
I think that it really depends on your expectations. I've had a variety of people's expectations. Some people say, I'm graduated, I'm done. I may see you again, I may never see you again. I'll see you later. And then we have others who kind of consider themselves, lifelong relationships. And so we talk, and it's not all the time. It's not as intense as it was during grad school, but you form networks and you talk to other people, and you just update each other on the big milestones and stuff, but you stay connected. I like to get the alumni connected to the current students to just get them talking, like, hey, have you met so and so, and they're interested in what you're interested, or they live in Nashville just like you want to, or whatever. It's just helping plug and create that network. And for faculty, that's what we do too, is we develop that network all throughout the university that you work at, if you work at a university, and then also across the country, and try to connect with people who can understand what you're going through. And that's universal. That doesn't ever stop. University presidents get together and they sit around and support each other and commiserate about what's happening. So it's never that search for mentorship or just colleagues that you can sit down with, that doesn't ever end. And if you have good colleagues and stuff, that's really good. But I think it is a choice whether or not you want you want to work with this person for a short while, or do you want to continue to enjoy a relationship with them throughout your career? It's up to both parties. I still talk to my doc advisor. We talk, a couple times a year. I've been out to see him. It was significant. He took me into his house. He fed me. He explained everything to me in terms of me being a first gen and being completely overwhelmed by being in doc school. And, he just was really important to me. And so he doesn't tell me what to do, but like, that's been an important relationship for me. And I thought, why would I end that just because I graduated?
Right.
It's definitely not the same anymore, but like, it's good to have mentors that span kind of the lifespan, and also who are in different positions and who can, be there for you when you have questions or just want to talk through stuff. I think that's important. As graduate students, I think it's important to have those mentors both within your programs if possible, but sometimes outside of it, because sometimes you just need a perspective and to get out of the smallness of departments. As an administrator, one of the things I see now is just how people get caught up in the little stuff. And there's a bigger world out there. And sometimes I just need to hear the perspective from someone. I don't want to argue about which office, who's getting what office, and that kind of stuff. It's like, that's not important. There's bigger issues. So I need to get out of the department and I need to meet people in other places and can make some good connections by, just not getting stuck with smallness sometimes. So sometimes you need to get out. And that's what groups can do, like ABSI, going to their conference and meeting people from all around the country, sometimes the world, and kind of comparing experiences and making, I remember going to conferences and coming back with tons of emails and following up and being very excited. Not because I felt like I was going to get anything out of any of these meetings, but just because I met some like-minded individuals and we could at least, recognize each other, talk to each other and things, but not necessarily, oh, I'm going to work with this person or write with this person. Some people do that, but it's just, this is someone who's pretty cool to know.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It almost sounds like, you spoke to being a mentor versus just being an advisor, because there are some faculty that choose to, strictly advise versus mentor. But that doesn't mean that, they don't have that relationship once students graduate, but it just sounds like, there is a defined difference between the two.
There can be, yeah. And it's also what the mentee wants. And as the mentor, also, are you willing to accept that your mentees may grow and sometimes may grow to outshine you? And is that okay? I'm always thrilled. When my alumni do stuff that I'm like, I don't even know how they would do that. That's cool. I'm always very proud of them. But our mentors, is there a point at which, your mentees get better than you at stuff? And are you happy about that? Or are you threatened by it? I think that there's different reactions to it. I'm always thrilled. Like, that's great. Because I don't need to be the best at everything. I told one of my students, I said, what you do, I don't feel competitive at all, because whatever you do, I'm going to take some of the credit because I was your advisor. So we joke around like that. But the reality is that I think you have to find mentors who are going to let you grow. Because I think there's also people I've met who want to mentor you, but want to kind of keep you in a particular kind of box, like only this far. And that's not helpful. But anyway, so I would look for mentors outside of your department, outside your university, and find those people who you can relate to, who are going to be honest with you, and who are, I don't know, people who are doing things you really like. I guess I'm less about transactional things like, this person is the head of this and maybe I can get that. I don't know. I don't know that that's helpful. It's not like that. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think, as we're speaking about the relationship when students graduate and engaging in that role as a mentor, what is some advice or tips that you may have for early career psychologists?
In terms of well, I think all the professional organizations have realized that early career is a vulnerable time, and they lose a lot of early career people because sometimes you might be more interested in a local issue or a more specific issue, or you walk in and you see these people who've been at it for a long time and you just feel there's no place for me, you're not a student anymore, kind of an identity crisis. Some of the research has shown that traditionally a lot of counseling psychologists don't affiliate with the Society of Counseling Psychology. If they stay in APA, they're kind of just generally affiliated. And so it's a time of identity, like, what am I going to be doing now for my career? And, am I what part of my identity is going to be salient right now? I've seen some of our alumni who have licensed clinical psychologists, little c, on the emails. And I just go, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? You are a counseling psychologist. I don't, give me a break. But, you know, I understand too that sometimes people use the word clinical in the sense of applied, right?
Mhm.
But, you know, I think that that's, as an ECP, that is a time that you are, you're not quite sure where you belong in your next role is. So that would be even more important to find a place that you feel good about, invest in it, and kind of network from there. Start small, right? My first group that I was um, involved in was the section on ethnic and racial diversity of Division
Mhm.
17, CERD,
Mhm.
and eventually became chair of CERD. And Melba Vasquez was the president of Division 17. And traditionally, the sections had not been invited to the leadership retreats.
Mhm.
And because of who she is and how inclusive she is, she says, we need them here because they represent these important parts of our identity. And
Mhm.
so they paid for us to come to this meeting, and it was huge. I mean, the sections got in there and we were able to talk to the leadership, and it just became more coordinated, right? And it took one person's vision to do that, like more inclusive. And um, I think that's super important. But that's, you know, I started with this little section at the time, and you know, got to know a lot of people in there. So it's, you know, breaking down these huge organizations into something manageable and starting small and then working out. Some people, you know, are able just to walk in and maybe immediately become part of the bigger group. That wasn't how I could do it, but that's okay. There's many different ways to do these things. So,
Mhm.
but I think there's more of a consciousness in all of the groups about ECPs, making sure that they're included in things like fellow status, awards, elections, that there aren't these old rules that somehow you have to kind of pay your dues until you can be involved in the professional organizations, because what's happening is people will just walk and go find something else to do. So I think that there's a lot more emphasis. So as ECPs, to understand that you're highly valued, but it's also a time of identity, you know, professional identity formation, and that it's a time where a lot of people decide what they're going to invest in. And so I would say, talking to people, I'm not telling anyone what to do or which group to be a part of.
Mhm.
But some people like their state organizations because this is what they're working on and they're more interested, or their area groups. And this is where they want to put their energy because they really want to work on, like, you know, state issues or local issues, and the other people, you know, want to do other things. But the ECP time is definitely a time that's you know, people are making decisions about things, and big groups are aware, like APA is aware that they're, I think their largest growing membership category is retired. And so I think that there's some lack of appeal that's happening. There's a gap between graduate students and then transitioning into membership. So what's happening there? And I would
Mhm.
say that the sooner that groups figure that out and can appeal to people and not lose so many,
Mhm.
that would be a good idea. And it happens also in NLPA. It happens in other groups too, that it's not like this is an APA problem. It's a professional problem. Because as you know, both know, once you get out there and you want to do your stuff, don't know that you want to pay those big dues and, you know, kind of trying to figure out what to do and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's a lot of competition for your money and attention and time after you graduate. So, you know, I think groups have to do a better job of keeping people.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really important. Definitely what I'm hearing from that is getting out there and talking to people, having a really solid network of people, to be able to lean on, to guide you, to be in network, to just to have, you know, ideas flowing of even different possibilities of what your future career can look like, because you know you're setting the foundation in your early career. So that, I'm definitely hearing some really salient points about really having a strong network of people around you during that time. So we've talked about early career professionals, and we've also talked about some tips for people in graduate school. But a huge section of our listeners are people trying to get in to graduate
Oh,
school and
mhm.
are applying. So just for, that audience, I wanted to ask you, do you have any, pieces of advice for people hoping to get into graduate school?
Yeah, so it depends on the program, right? So I think a lot of the bigger master's programs, it's less about the one-to-one fit. So it would be a different
Mhm.
advice. And also
Mhm,
knowing that in counseling psych, a lot of the traditional pathway for many programs, although it's not every program, is a master's program, then a doctoral program.
mhm,
Um, so knowing that in a lot of master's programs, it's a little harder to get involved on the research end, and it's not as much about the faculty, the one-to-one work with faculty and stuff. So as a master's student, you're probably going to have to really find that, and
mhm,
try to find a research group or a lab that you can kind of get in with and try it on and those kinds of things. For doc students, I think it is in many programs about the match to the
Mhm.
faculty, not just the faculty, but their line of research. And so that, and match is a funny thing, because I think match can be used as a way to keep people out, or it can be used to
Mhm.
talk about, compatibility.
mhm,
Um, so I kind of hesitate to say, are you a match? I guess I often feel like I can match with a lot of different people. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily like an objective standard. But the thing is, can you see yourself working on something like what the folks are working with?
Mhm.
Um, can you see yourself in some of the publications that come out? Can you see whatever work is going on there? Is there someone or several someones there? Because you need a committee who you can
mhm,
see as being, involved and investing in you.
Mhm.
So I think it's two different processes. I think it's the masters is a different match than the doctoral. You just have less interaction, I think, with the full range of faculty as a master's student, and as a doc student, it's kind of a different world in terms of your involvement or your expected involvement. So it's going to be more important that you find people. Most impressed with people who prepare,
Mhm.
who know the specific types of things that are going on, and want to talk to graduate students and all that kind of stuff. That's all great stuff, and to me is
mhm,
demonstrating that you understand that a doctoral program is being a professional. Even though you're still a student, there's a lot expected of you. You're going to have to work and
Mhm.
do counseling, do research, do service and assistantship, and you
mhm,
really already have your master's, and so you're going to really be expected to be pretty much a professional.
Mhm.
And people who realize that tend to do better, in my opinion, as the
Mhm.
people who think, "Oh, it's just more school." Well, not really. It's more
yeah,
school, yes,
Yeah.
but like the classes count less and less for what you're supposed to do, and there's a lot of trust that's going to be placed in you to
Mhm.
do things, to see clients, to finish notes, to run research subjects. There's just going to be a lot expected of you. So that's important to convey and to connect. I get a lot of people writing me to ask me about what do I think, and am I interested in working with them and stuff. And I always reply. I always like hearing from people. I think the interesting thing is people who have ideas that have nothing to do with what I do, and I guess they're asking, do you mind kind of um, would you be interested in me coming in and working on, I don't know, I was trying to think of something that somebody asked me, and I'd be like, that's a pretty cool subject, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know why you would want to
mhm,
work with me on this,
yeah,
Mhm.
right? And although I don't expect a bunch of mini me's, there are areas that I know about and things that I'm more comfortable with. So I think
Mhm.
it's great to have cool, expansive ideas, but um, I think most of the times I'm looking for someone who is going to take it um, seriously, is going to be very interested and going to learn, and is also going to be open to developing their research ideas. But it's going to be like, I don't tell students what to study, but it's really not going to be helpful for me as your advisor if you're studying something that I have no idea what you're studying.
right,
That's going to be like having no help. And
Mhm.
you know. So I guess knowing the faculty and knowing what they do and what they expect, and looking at their graduates and seeing what they're doing. I mean, and just seeing, hey, this is something I could see myself, and understanding the environment. Some programs are like, yeah, you're coming here and you're going to be a faculty person, and that's the only kind of acceptable thing. And then others are like, no, you're going to be a practitioner, and others are like, you could be either. So there's supposed to be a lot of data on the websites about what the outcomes are for people. But I would just say, you know, preparation and really understanding what each program has to offer, and the length. Someone just wrote me and asked me, like, I see that yours is a 4-year program. Can I do it in 3? And I'm like, this isn't a game show. I'm not really telling you. I'm not negotiating with anyone on the front end before you even get in. That like you can be done in 3, but everyone else is in 4. Like, oh, please, you know, this is the standard program. If you want to be done quicker, then there's other programs that you could go to, but this is our best guess. I said it nicer than that, but it's interesting what people will ask, you know, because, you know, those things aren't negotiable many times. Some programs will tell you exactly how long it takes, or the average amount of time it takes. And if there's a set curriculum, people don't get exempted from that unless you're a transfer or something. Well, and this wasn't the case. But anyway, so I would say also be very professional in your interactions with people over email. I've had a couple people be unprofessional, and they've gotten nowhere with me because, you know, joking around and, you know, I don't know. I think start formal and work from there, work down. You know, maybe you'll get to be a very informal thing. On my research team, I don't let anyone call me doctor. We're very informal. Students come over to my house. We really do attenuate the power differences. But on that interview day, you know, everyone's got to be on their best behavior. And as we get to know each other, we can always move down. But I always think that you know, if you're going to start there, where are we going to go from here? Because exactly. But some people are super formal, and you'll always be formal with them. But so if that's what you want, then cool.
Yeah, I think you touched on so many different pieces. I definitely love the part about matching and how matching may be looking at like compatibility versus like actually, you know, getting along with people. I also like that you touched on the differences between a master's and a doctorate and what that may look like, what people may be looking for in programs. Because yes, this podcast is designed for people interested in their PhD, but sometimes a PhD is often, a master's is often the prerequisite for that. So people want to know what that may look like as well. But what really stood out the most to me was you talked about being open and then being professional and understanding that you're building this professional identity while you're in this program. And I think, you know, that's not something that I think many of our previous guests have touched on, but it is really important. And of course, it is something that I've noticed as a student as well, that, you know, we are becoming professionals. As I'm in my 4th year, you know, heading to internship, I'll be shortly becoming like an early career psychologist. Like I have to think of myself in that way. Like I'm not just a student, I'm a psychologist in training, and thinking about yourself in that way and interacting with your peers in that way and your faculty in that way. I think that is ultimately what may set you apart and get you maybe even like a head start and when applying to programs. And of course, being formal and being professional. Being formal in your emails, guys. I hate to hear that. That's so, you know, that's the first thing, right? You want to make sure that you are being formal and professional. But our final question for you is, what do you feel was the most important aspect contributing to you wanting and or building a career? Like if you could pin down one thing.
Well, I would say that as a son of immigrants, you know, I learned in the US, being first gen and son of immigrants, that if something didn't exist, that you had to build it. And so that meant the NLPA, and I certainly didn't do it by myself. I did it with other people. When NLPA didn't have a journal, figured out how to start a journal. When there wasn't a avenue for clinics in for Spanish speakers in Athens to get any type of services, I started a clinic. Now I say that, but that took a lot of work and it took a lot of time to do it. But I think that kind of idea of the immigrant spirit would be, you know, or first gen spirit or whatever, is that, you know, if the place isn't there for you, if the infrastructure isn't there for you, well, build the infrastructure. And who's going to tell you no? And I can see my advisor from grad school, Dr. Howard, he would always say, well, who's going to tell me no? I can just do it. If I want to do this, I'll do it. So he started a solar panel company and started making solar panels. And why not? He said, well, because I can. Why not? And, you know, he just looked into how to do it and he did it. So, you know, I think that that's that spirit, I think, of like, if something's really not there, then why don't you make it? And that sounds simple, but it's not. You know, when I started my clinic, I put at least 7 or 8 years of prep time in before the doors were open. It wasn't simple. It wasn't easy, but I wasn't going to wait around until somebody else did it. I started a journal. It took a lot of money to do it, so we had to raise the money. I think at the time, in the 2010s, it was about $18,000, and that's a lot of money to get. You know, I think it's a lot of money. So, you know, you have to learn things like how do you raise $18,000? Because I didn't just have it laying around to start a journal with. You know, so I think part of it is to me, it's always been kind of daring to create things if it's not there for you, and using my expertise as a psychologist, as a counseling psychologist, to try to create structures that are, you know, are going to be helpful, but like that weren't there before, or improve the ones that are there too. There's that too. By your participation in these groups and stuff, you can help it become something different. So either build it or make it better.
For sure. I really love that, you know, to wrap the episode on that piece of inspiration. And, you know, although it will take, you know, an amount of courage to do that, to do something that either hasn't been done before or to change an existing structure. And it's going to take work to do, but I really appreciate you leaving us with that just because it doesn't exist now doesn't mean it can't exist. And, you know, we have the tools to do that and to change that. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Delgado-Romero, for, you know, sitting with us tonight and, you know, answering some of our questions. It's been really crucial and just really insightful, great to hear about, especially, you know, as Brittany's about to be an early career professional very soon. I'm still, you know, in the beginning stages. You know, I have a ways to go. And to our listeners who, you know, are either hoping to get on the journey or currently on it or in the field, this episode, I'm sure, can help in so many different ways to so many different people. So this will conclude, you know, our episode for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Delgado-Romero.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Good luck to both of you.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, to our listeners, make sure you follow us on social media at Psych Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And of course, if you want to see the actual video, you can always watch us on YouTube. And again, thank you, Dr. Delgado Romero, for, being available and present and just giving us so much knowledge about this career.
My pleasure.